One of the most confusing things for me out of Jurassic World Rebirth was how did the D-Rex actually escape? Because in one of the opening scenes, we clearly see that it's still being contained. I mean, the door closes, sure it makes its way into the airlock, but at no point does it try to attack the door, or does the door look ajar in any shape or form. I mean, it's completely closed. Therefore, the D-Rex didn't escape on its own. So was there something more sinister at play here? Did someone help the D-Rex escape? Because obviously later in the movie, we see the door wide open, and it does not look as if the D-Rex attacked that door. It almost looks like it'd been let loose. Well, in this video, we're going to deep dive and reveal the hidden clues in Jurassic World Rebirth that point to the shocking truth behind the D-Rex's terrifying escape. And immediately, I'd like to address something here, and I know what you're probably thinking. Well, surely if the power went down, the doors would open, right? They'd be easy to open. That would be a massive security flaw in Jurassic World Rebirth's facility. I mean, if the power goes out, why would all the enclosures suddenly open? That does not make any sense at all. If the power went out, the doors would stay closed. I mean, you have extremely dangerous animals in them. So if the power does go out, it's highly unlikely that that caused the door to open. But that was my initial thought, because we know that the power was cycling every hour or so because the power was initially off when the cast and crew reach the abandoned facility, and then the power comes back on. But that would not cause the doors to open. So we're going to rule that out immediately, which makes this video and the D-Rex's escape even more confusing and potentially sinister. Now I know by saying that immediately you think someone let the D-Rex out, right? Well, who? I know it almost seems wild to think, but let's look back at the start of the movie. We know the D-Rex is contained, and inside its enclosure there seem to be several people letting off shots, I mean gunfire. They had armed guards in there. This obviously sparks the D-Rex outbreak scene, although it doesn't actually escape. The lady still manages to maintain it in its enclosure, and judging by the look of all the scientists in that location, they're all running away from there. There is no one in their right mind going to open that pen. Well, anyone who worked for InGen at that point in time. But just like in the original Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs didn't escape on their own. They had help, remember? Dennis Nedry is the one who basically turned off all the power. Yes, he worked for InGen, but he was also a double agent and decided to work for Biosyn in stealing them embryos. We all know how that turned out. Could it be the same thing that happened here? We know that this flashback scene was in 2010. We know that because in the beginning credits, it basically says 17 years in the past from 2027. And at that point, Jurassic World was open. And are you telling me at no point did anyone even consider stealing them embryos from Jurassic World? Biosyn, perhaps, who already tried to do so from the original Jurassic Park? That is an option, but what evidence do we have? Well, believe it or not, there's actually multiple pieces of evidence which can string this together, and there's multiple scenarios which could have happened with the D-Rex. We know Dr. Henry Wu goes on to work for Biosyn. We literally see him in their labs. He's the one who created the locusts. Essentially a double agent, right? So at 2010, Henry Wu was way involved with InGen, Masrani Global. He's the one who was creating all the hybrids, and you're telling me he wasn't involved in the D-Rex's creation? I mean, he was the one who initially came up with the first hybrids, so I'm sure he was the guy who created the D-Rex, right? And let's not forget our combat-obsessed comrade, Rick Hoskins, who was obsessed with letting the raptors loose in a live test environment. Perhaps he decided to open the door for the D-Rex to see how it would conduct itself in an open environment and if they could use it for a weapon. Now, obviously, that's pure speculation for Vic Hoskins, but Dr. Henry Wu, during the collapse of Jurassic World, he literally takes a helicopter off of the island to go and work for another person and then goes to work for Biosyn. Henry Wu was extremely shady. Now, I'm not saying he opened the door to the D-Rex, but he definitely knew of its creation and could have sold that information on to someone else, a competitor, potentially Biosyn. Now, this is where things get extremely interesting because I want to talk about what we see in the movie and how it backs this theory up. And not just the Biosyn theory, but potentially the US military. And this is where things start to get wild. See, not long after the guys land on this new island and make their way to the facility, they come across a downed helicopter stuck up in the trees, very much like the initial scenes we see in Predator. Remember that? Now, when I watched this in the cinemas yesterday, I took special notice of the markings on the helicopter and the environmental storytelling, which I'm pretty sure most people would have missed. You see, the horrible corporate man finds the helicopter first, but he's looking down at the ground and he picks up dog tags. Dog tags. We all know where they come from, right? Military soldiers / operatives. And at first I thought, oh, that's a bit odd. And then it pans up into the helicopter. And on the side of the helicopter bears a striking symbol, markings. That marking right there bears resemblance to the US military markings. You know, on this Huey helicopter. Not only that, they're bearing firearms. Now, we know that isn't out in the ordinary because we see the people in the lab firing upon the D-Rex, so we know they would carry firearms. But the presence of dog tags and this seeming US military helicopter started to get me thinking, why would the US government be there when it was obviously InGen controlled? And obviously what they were probably doing was highly illegal. And not only that, how would they even known of its existence? And how would this even play into the D-Rex? Well, it's pretty obvious. During the fall of this island, this secret island, numerous animals were loose into the wild. This is prior 2010, right? There were no dinosaurs out in the wild at this point, but a Mosasaurus, several Spinosaurus, a Quetzal seemed to escape from this island. I mean, the Mosasaurus was out in the ocean along with the Spinos. You're telling me no one noticed this? Well, obviously they did, and the US government noticed this. That is initially how they were aware of the island, and then fast forward to 2027, they're still aware of the island then. I mean, they would know dinosaurs were on there, right? Probably this dangerous D-Rex. You're telling me they wouldn't have investigated prior to this? Of course they did, but they decided not to go back, because here is exactly what happened. You see, shortly after the fall of this secret facility, the Mosasaurus gets out along with several Spinosaurids. Reportings of this happen very shortly after their escape. The US Coast Guard and military going immediately to investigate. They find this abandoned facility, InGen logos plastered all over it, but at this point they're still conducting their investigation. They land, find the abandoned facility, and obviously when they do so, they find the abandoned D-Rex in its pen. Now, several years wouldn't have passed at this point. Few weeks max before the US military were involved, maybe a month, the D-Rex would have sustained itself in its habitat. Well, its enclosure. I mean, the film even tells us that the colossal dinosaurs they're looking for can live 100 years plus, and this D-Rex was absolutely massive, so its lifespan wasn't a problem. We can only assume its metabolism, but the likelihood is the US military found this facility, found this D-Rex enclosure, and opened the door. This would explain why the door was open, not forced ajar, destroyed. Someone opened it. It was the US military. Oh, but we're not done just there, because that doesn't explain why the D-Rex just stays around this enclosure. Did you notice that it never once showed up prior in the movie, or any indication that it was anywhere else on the island? It seems to only live at this facility. I'll get onto that though, so don't panic. Let's continue with the military right now, because obviously we have this downed helicopter. Now, it's quite easy to say that the D-Rex can and does destroy helicopters. We literally see it in the movie. But did it destroy the helicopter we actually see where the guy finds the dog tags? Highly unlikely. And there's one prime suspect for that. The Quetzalcoatlus, right? That could have easily attacked the helicopter, and that's how the helicopter goes down away from this facility. That's the only logical explanation. Unless the D-Rex took a swipe at it when the Marines or Army men, whatever you want to call them, leave the facility, board the helicopter, and the D-Rex takes a swipe at it, and it goes down just outside of the facility's location. That's possible, but nowhere near as likely as the Quetz. But that's all assuming now that there was no shady involvement here. And you might be thinking, well, what do you mean by that? Well, as I said earlier, that's not assuming that Henry Wu or some other dodgy person in InGen sold this data to a competitor or even tipped off the government. Because let's not forget, it's not just the military which would carry dog tags or kit their aircraft/helicopter out in some type of military livery. Mercenaries would also do the same thing. Someone who knew of this island's and its inhabitants' existence could have easily have passed this data on to a competitor such as Biocen. Biocen launched a mission into this island to recover the specimens/data, and it all goes horribly wrong, exactly like I described earlier. Except rather than it being the US military, it's the mercenary group. Although the mercenary group won't explain why the Coast Guard etc. are aware of the island and never went back to it. The D-Rex never smashed its way out of its enclosure, it was literally let loose. And the only reason someone would let that thing out of its enclosure is if A, they never knew anything was in the enclosure, or B, they wanted to retrieve it. They wanted it to leave the enclosure so they could capture it and transport it off of the island. Both of which play perfectly into my theory. But the one thing here, why didn't the D-Rex just leave this location? I mean, surely there'd be nothing around this area for it, right? I mean, it's been let loose, but yet we only ever see evidence that it stays near this abandoned facility. Why? Well, isn't it obvious? We first see the D-Rex in the future with our gang and the protags actually in this enclosure. It doesn't abandon this enclosure, it decides to just live in there, and that's probably where it's been its entire life. It's made the enclosure its home now, its nest. So it never really leaves the location. We could also assume that there's some type of automatic feeder. It would still be operational because we know power does return to that facility every several hours or so. Now obviously after a period of several years there probably wouldn't be any feed left in there, but we can assume for a good while it would have enough to sustain the D-Rex. All the D-Rex then has to do is go out locally and hunt the fauna and all the other dinosaurs. Potentially them titanosaurs. Now I know a lot of people say nothing hunts a titanosaur, it's too big. This is the Jurassic World universe, and even the paleontologist guy, the museum guy, actually says that there are other predators in the world which hunts them. We're not going by real world logic here, this is Jurassic World. So the fact that he says that in universe, that D-Rex probably would be hunting them titanosaurs. If it does need to sustain itself anyway. But the entire confusing thing for me was how this D-Rex actually escaped. Why the door was never destroyed or bashed in, and why it was left ajar. And we've confidently answered that. It wasn't the power, it didn't just open itself magically, someone opened it. And that someone was a military organization, whether mercenaries or from the government, it's hard to really say. But that's how the D-Rex escaped its enclosure. There was a sinister undertone and the storytelling was there. We only had to look for it and connect the dots. And that's what I did for us right now. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe, and check out all my other videos. Check out my review if you want and see my initial thoughts on the movie. Did I enjoy it or not? And don't worry, I've got plenty more Rebirth content coming up. Subscribe, you're not going to want to miss any of this, believe me. Massive thanks to the YouTube members and InGen security team, DVM Wannabe 1018, Hammer Time, and our Jurassic CEO, Joseph Frost Ghost. Thanks guys. And hang on, if you came across the D-Rex out in the open, could your day get any worse? You bet Jurassic can. Catch you later.